ठीक है ठीक है आप करवाओ मिड। Playing video in another 3 minutes, sharp 306.
The COVID-19 pandemic has served as a reminder that even in the wake of a crisis, it's important we not stray too far from the basics. To elaborate, next we bring you Kiran Mazumdar Shah, Chairperson Biocon, who will share a glimpse of her journey during these incredibly trying times.
Good afternoon, and it's a great pleasure to be part of this very important summit. I'd like to start by saying that India is a country that has always responded to a crisis, unleashing its latent potential. And the COVID pandemic is no different, because in early March, when the COVID epidemic was then described as a global pandemic, India, like the rest of the world, was unprepared. Uh, Over the next few weeks, I think countries started realizing what the impact of this pandemic was, and very quickly we realized that a lot of the medical resources started getting directed to the US and European countries, which had the worst impact of the pandemic in the early days. India was relatively unscathed at that time, but we realized that there was much to do. And fortunately, the country was set into a lockdown mode by the Prime Minister uh, towards the third week of March. And it was during this time that we had to quickly get back to basics and see how we had to fend for ourselves. And what I went through over the next several months was a journey of realization, recognition, and great confidence that we had an untapped, latent talent which could actually innovate, research, and come up with all that we needed to do to combat this pandemic. So let me start with the early days when we started using, information technology and good software to see how we could do contact tracing. So this was the first response that India actually came up with. Passengers coming from, overseas into our airports had to basically fill in certain information, and that information was quickly translated into contact tracing. Where did they come from? Who are the people they were with? Their families, their friends. And very quickly we had developed an Arogya Setu app which could do tremendous contact tracing. So I remember we used to keep talking about the Bangalore model, the Karnataka model, and this model was nothing but contact tracing. I think we had a very high level and a very sophisticated level of contact tracing, which allowed us to keep the virus under wraps and the virus from spreading. We had amazing technologies that could quickly understand where the virus was when it had an outbreak, how we could contain that zone, create buffer zones. And then we realized that we needed to test. We didn't have enough testing kits. And within weeks, we had Indian life science companies, diagnostic companies, suddenly develop, very, very reliable RT-PCR kits. And this quickly then enabled us to be self-reliant and not depend on the imported kits, which were really being rationed out to the world at that time. And this was also a time when India realized that its whole health didn't have enough ventilators. We didn't have enough hospital beds in the ICU setting, etc., etc. But within the 68 days of the lockdown that we all went through, the transformation was apparent to everyone. We had developed a large number of testing kits. We started developing antibody kits. We started developing antigen kits, you name it. And suddenly, for me, a scientist and someone who leads a scientific institution, what was even more, rewarding for me as a scientist was to see the unleashing of potential in all our national laboratories. It was really very, very heartwarming for me to see the kind of science emerging out of our national laboratories. And all of a sudden, everyone in science was excited. Everyone in science was doing something important to give their bit to fight this pandemic. Today, when I look at what we have achieved over the last few months, I think we must feel very proud. Because what we've done is we've gone back to basics. We've gone back to the basics of our national laboratories and started researching, started innovating. And we've suddenly seen the value of doing this. We have now come up with the Atmanirbhar Bharat agenda. And all this has happened because we started looking at not just diagnostics. We are coming up with our own vaccines. So we have two companies, Bharat Biotech in partnership with ICMR and Zydus Cadila, both who have now entered phase 1 trials. So we are catching up. We are saying to the rest of the world, we are right there with you. And we've also got our large vaccine industry, which is basically saying to the world, we need you. You need us, and we need you, because without us, you will not be able to supply vaccines at a cost level that the world can benefit from. And you just heard Professor Mohammad Yunus saying that he's worried about what will happen to the vaccines when they finally get approved. Will it all be the prerogative and the preserve of the affluent Western world? And will the rest of the world have to go with begging bowls? I don't think so. Thanks to India's vaccine industry. As you all know, Serum Institute has already partnered with Oxford University well before AstraZeneca took over that program. And today, the good news is that the Gates Foundation and Gavi have come together to make sure that Serum Institute is financed to produce the first 100 million doses of the COVID vaccine. We also have other vaccine manufacturers entering into various other partnerships with global vaccine manufacturers so that Indian vaccine producers can actually play a very important role in providing vaccines for most of the world or for the Gavi markets. So I think this tells you what the strength is. I have often said that the next IT sector for India is the healthcare sector. Life sciences is a talent, is a research capability, is an innovation opportunity for India, which we have not leveraged in the right way. Today, the focus and the spotlight is on this sector. We are producing, medicines for the world. Even during COVID, they're relying a lot on India for the antibiotics, for the HCQ, and for many other drugs. India is actually playing its role in, of course, vaccines for the world. And now we're also developing important diagnostics for the world. And I'm sure that we are going to be very much a part of the global supply chain for healthcare. Because what the world has realized during this pandemic is that the whole healthcare system globally is broken. We need health professionals, we need doctors, we need medical professionals, nurses, you name it. And India has a huge opportunity to actually be a very important part of that healthcare resource that we can provide for the world. So I think these are very, very exciting times for us as a nation, us as scientists, us as engineers, and us as digital IT professionals, because this is a world that has convergent technologies. Without the power of digital technologies and computer modeling and data analytics, we will not be able to do justice to life sciences and biological sciences. Today, what is also very apparent is that regulatory processes are being abbreviated based on scientific rationale, based on software and digital technologies. This is now a time for us to also go beyond COVID and say, what can we do with our life sciences sector? COVID has shown us the way. COVID has given us that opportunity. Let's not waste this crisis. Let's move ahead with a sense of confidence and resilience to say that we can rebuild the healthcare sector, the life sciences sector, with renewed vigor to the extent that we can be a global leader. And that's the way we have to look at the future. That's the way we have to look at research and innovation and get that mojo back into the science that we used to love in the past. The engineering capabilities that we are so good at, and the medical skills that we have an abundance of. Let's put it all together and let's make sure that we actually now don't waste all that has happened in these last few months, but build on it and make this sector and India truly Atmanirbhar in terms of healthcare and life sciences. So I really hope, I know that we as a company are definitely very excited. We have been doing a lot in every part of the COVID crisis. We're even looking at drugs that can actually address some of the very, very serious complexities that come out of this disease. And we want to develop products that can save lives. But I think there is an opportunity for every life science company. Today, many incubators are now getting a new breath of fresh air because they are able to now innovate and get into a mode where they can actually take their ideas from the laboratory to the market. That's the opportunity I'm talking about. And that's what we really need to focus on. As a scientist, I also believe that what this COVID crisis has done for us is to also open up the whole space of clinical research. Today, we have ICMR that is now suddenly realizing the importance of having clinical registries, of having clinical databases of everything that's happening in COVID management, and making sure that we now get into publication in a big way. We've always maintained that to do any kind of publication, you need data. For a population of our size and the disease burden that we have, this data can emanate out of multiple opportunities. COVID has shown us the way. We have to rebuild our clinical research sector. This was a thriving sector 10 years ago. We killed it because we said we don't want to have clinical trials anymore. A few years ago, we realized the big mistake we had made, and we tried to revive this sector. Today, that realization and recognition of the importance of clinical research, the importance of clinical trials, and the importance of being able to come up with new treatment regimens and new data is so evident that I, for one, believe that this is going to rebuild the clinical sector, the clinical research sector, very fast with very high-end capabilities, which will be embedded in digital technology. I think we must not also lose this opportunity of regulatory reforms, because COVID has shown us the way of how to do parallel processing instead of sequential, slow processing, which takes so much time. COVID has taught us the creation of virtual single windows that we keep talking about all the time, which never happened. Today, all of that is happening. Today, we are in a virtual world that's allowing us to do things much faster, much smarter, and we've caught up with the rest of the world. I think we are on a level playing field. This is our opportunity to lose. Let's not do that. I think this is a time when we have to leverage our research, our innovation, our science. And I think this is also a time for translational research. I would like to see every hospital having a translational research setup, because this is an opportunity for us to do cutting edge research, basic research, and things which will actually transform the way we look at ourselves and the world. I think India has to be looked at as a serious scientific player. And India has to be looked at as a country that creates high value innovation. When you look at the fact that we are the world's largest vaccine producer, the world's largest producer of generic drugs, and yet we only account for 3% of the global pharma sector or the global pharma value chain, I think that says it all. How do we even become a 10% of that value chain? That will actually get us to a huge growth momentum. And the way to do that is to make sure that we get a better share of the value creation that happens in the pharma sector. And for that, we have to research, we have to innovate. And I feel very confident that in the next 5 years, we can legitimately claim a stake of that global pharma supply chain in a much more dominant way, in a much more confident way, and in a value creation way, which will be good for startups, which will be good for the sector, which will be good for innovators, and which will be good for the industry at large. That will then propel India in amongst the global league in terms of the whole healthcare and life sciences sector. So with that, I'd like to thank you for giving me this opportunity of speaking at this amazing summit that you have put together. And I do hope that we can look forward to better times ahead. I do hope that we can also look forward to a vaccine in the near future. Thank you.
Arako Vikram ji.
थैंक यू, कॉन्ग्रेचुलेशंस टू यू, ठीक ठाक निकल गया।